clock now. We'll probably get started in 1 or 2 minutes. So thanks for your patience.
So Matthew, I think we're ready to go if you want. Okay. This is the Leaders in Housing Counseling call. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you here in a balmy August day. Hopefully it's good weather for wherever you are. This is Bruce Dorr-Palin from the National Housing Resource Center, and let me just take a quick minute, talk about what we've got on the agenda. We need to get moving to cover a lot of ground today. So we're going to talk a little bit about the CFPB letter that we're putting together around the personal counselor information that's being required by a few servicers, trying to stop this practice. We're going to give Matthew's going to give us our regular federal funding update, see what the grim news is. We've got Chris Dove from the Treasury Department, who's going to be talking with us about the escalation lines that Treasury has, and hopefully this will become a more useful tool for us in the future. So I think this will be very helpful to all of us. We're going to give you an update. We've been talking a lot about integrating housing counseling into the mortgage and delinquency process. There's a number of things that have happened, and wanted to just bring you up to date a little bit about them. I think we've been trickling them through the list, and I wanted to kind of weave them together so people understand a little bit of the bigger picture. We're completely in the let's figure this out mode, but we're making progress, so this will be valuable for counseling in the future. We've got a meeting coming up around the Federal Reserve with their examiners, so the people who are looking at servicing cases. And we're going to need your help on diving into the couple servicers that are actually supervised by the Fed and identify what the problems are. I think we've got some, when you see the list, you'll understand. I think you'll have a lot to say about this, and I just want to make sure that we're getting real input on the field on this one. We've had a series of meetings with Treasury around HAMP and making it work more effectively, and we will, and I want to just bring people a little bit up to date about what the issues are and progress we're making. And then just talk a little bit about the listserv, and the flurry of activity that's been over there the past couple weeks. I think it's all good news, but wanted to make sure everybody was up to date. So let's start off with counselor personal information. So hats off to Daniel Ruggiero. He's at Homes on the Hill CDC. He raised an issue a week and a half ago, whenever it was, about that Banco Popular was requiring counselors to provide their personal Social Security number and birth date. There was a ton of activity on the list about this and people's experience and outrage about it. We put together a letter that's going to the CFPB, which we've been vetting. A couple of you gave us good copy edits on that. I love it when people redline edit what we do and clean up the language and focus it a little and sometimes toughen it up a little. That's all great stuff. Appreciate that a lot. We also surfaced that U.S. Bank requires the last 4 digits of people's Social Security numbers. All of it is irrelevant. This is not these are not transactions that the counselor are doing on their personal finances. This is a professional relationship. There's no reason to provide personal financial information in this transaction for the counseling activities. We were able to stop this activity at HUD. earlier when there was restrictions on submitting data to HUD, and so we want to raise this up with CFPB and see if they can't intervene. And a couple of you had said that you were in conversations with the CFPB, and we're going to try to raise it as well. And we're hoping that all reinforces the message. That's all good. I've sent to the list the final version of the letter, and we'll submit that this afternoon. If anybody's got a giant concern about something on it, please email me right away. But this will go in this afternoon. Otherwise, we're making 3 points. And the first point is no personal information should ever be required for counselors to be submitting cases in the professional context of their work. The second one is that the driving identifier should be in third-party. Excuse me, I didn't say that. This is for third-party authorizations to work with a client, and the particular issue was specific to delinquencies, but this could apply to any situation. It could be for pre-purchase counseling as well. Our view is that the third-party authorization should be based on the agency, not on the individual counselor's personal information. And you want the authorization to be from the agency so that if somebody's out sick that day, there's another person can step in and manage the case, and you don't have to submit new paperwork as well. And we added a third issue, which really was one that surfaced in the round of meetings we did with various agencies and bureaus in DC this spring, which is when a counselor calls into a servicer before the RMA and the authorization's been submitted, but in trying to stop a foreclosure or trying to get information to be able to complete the RMA, homeowners on the telephone, and some of the servicers have prevented the counselors from speaking, and this is so that's unacceptable. It's particularly bad when there's language problems and counselors providing translation. All that stuff is just crazy. We are arguing that oral authorization for those phone calls ought to be acceptable. We think that the wording that the CFPB used on having a representative, an authorized representative, covers that easily, and we'd like that to be built into the system as well and stop those problems. So thanks again. This is the system working. This is when you guys dive in, it really help us out. That is completely what we need to do, and another good example of people diving in and making it work. So send us any comments you got if you think that didn't quite nail it on the head, but this is going in this afternoon. Okay. So next is we're up for federal appropriations for our work. Matthew, what's the news?
All right, thanks, Bruce. So it's I think just before our last call was just before Congress is getting ready to go on break. So they're about 2 weeks now into a 5-week break. So there's not a lot of action happening at the moment. But we do want to just give a quick update to make sure it stays on people's radars. So just to recap where we were, just before the House and Senate went on break, on the House side, the Republican leadership had pulled their bill from the House floor. So their bill would fund HUD housing counseling at $35 million and NFMC at $58 million. It turns out that they lost even some moderate Republicans because those numbers were just so low for the overall THUD budget that they ended up pulling it from the floor at the last minute. Hal Rogers, the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, came right out and recognized that they just didn't have the votes to pass it. Then on the Senate side, where the bill is much more favorable for housing counseling, so that's the bill that funds it at $55 million for HUD housing counseling and $77 million for NFMC. Unfortunately, kind of also at the last minute, Senate Republicans got enough votes to filibuster the bill. There had been, at the Appropriations Committee, 6 Republicans had joined the Democrats to send the bill out of committee, and then a bunch of Republicans had also voted on a couple of procedural votes, had voted along with the Democrats, but at the last second, Mitch McConnell, decided to make an issue of it and really rally his caucus to filibuster. And so it ended up that Susan Collins from Maine was the lone Republican that voted with the Democrats, and so the Senate bill was filibustered. So because of those two things that happened just before the August recess, there's really two likely outcomes at this point. The most likely outcome is that there's going to be, at least for the short term, a continuing resolution. So even Speaker Boehner has recognized that there's only 9 legislative days for the House in September. Funding will expire. FY 2013 funding will expire at September 30th. It's only 9 days to get something done before funding expires. So he said that he thinks the way to go is for the House to pass at least a short-term continuing resolution. So again, that looks like the most likely outcome. The one alternative would be if there's been talk of a grand bargain now for some time, which would be some combination of cutting spending, increasing revenues, would deal with the sequestration, would probably also deal with the debt ceiling. All these things kind of rolled into one great big compromise. I think there's still, some hope of that happening, but I'm not sure that it's. I think the continuing resolution at this point is the more likely outcome. But just because, so that's kind of where things are. Not a lot of change since the last time. Oh, and I will just say quickly that in the case that it is a continuing resolution, it would be the same funding that there was for FY 2013, which was $40 million for HUD housing counseling funding, $80 million for NFMC, but then that would be minus the sequestration. Can't say exactly what that would be, but it might be, the estimates we've heard are something about maybe an 8% cut. But there's also some flexibility there where it wouldn't necessarily be across-the-board cuts like it was with the sequestration. There could be, they could make it easier for agencies to have some flexibility in how they accomplish those cuts.
I think the number was $45 billion on HUD housing counseling.
Oh, thank you.
And I do like the recess picture on this slide that's on the screen right now.
Right. So just because Congress is on recess, it doesn't mean that that we should be taking a recess as well. It's actually really the absolute perfect time for folks to be meeting with their representatives, with their senators and their representative, meeting in the local offices and talking to them. That's exactly what the August recess is for. And really, we keep driving this message home, but just want to reiterate it. There's really two things to be addressing when you're having these conversations. Just in the short term, the issue is obviously talking about the need for federal funding, talking about the work that you do in their district or their state, just really stressing to them the importance of the work that you do and the need for federal funding. But then equally, if not more important, is the building the long-term relationships. So we want to be, you folks to be meeting with the members, meeting with their staffers, and just fostering strong relationships so that, when we need a champion, we have folks that we can turn to that recognize the value of housing counseling and the need for it. The perfect example of why this is so valuable is in FY 2011 when after funding had been zeroed out, it was really Charlie Dent and counseling agencies that had a great relationship with him. They were able to get funding restored. Charlie Dent's a Republican from Pennsylvania, folks that aren't aware. So it really just goes to show how much a single relationship with a single, especially Republican member, can make a huge difference. So we do also keep making the point that it's especially important that we're building these relationships with Republicans. We generally can count on support from Democrats, and we don't want to take them for granted, but it is important that we're fostering those relationships with Republicans. So the last thing I'm just putting on the screen now is a list of, I think it's 20 key Senate Republicans. These are all folks who, at one point or another, voted along with the Democrats for the THUD bill. So there's the 6 who voted for it at the Appropriations Committee. There were a bunch who voted not to send it back when there was a motion to send it back to the committee, and just a few different procedural votes. So these are all people that have shown some support for at least the THUD budget and are, therefore amenable to persuasion in terms of supporting the bill again. But again, they're just folks that have shown some sympathy to the THUD budget and by extension possibly to housing counseling. So they're folks that we want to really target. Susan Collins is just tacked on as also important because she's the one who's just been consistently supportive throughout. So she's certainly important, but we almost put her along with the Democrats at this point as far as the THUD bill goes. So that's all I have to say. I'll hand it back to Bruce.
Excellent. So we have our guest today is Chris Dove from the Department of Treasury. Chris is working with the escalation lines, the HAMP solution centers, and one of the issues I think that for our business is the challenge of when you're working with a servicer and you have all the pieces together for a good modification, and you just can't get the servicer to either pull the trigger and make the decision, or they turn the case down. You look at the numbers; they make complete sense. It's unimaginable, and the question is, how do you escalate? And obviously, all of us escalate internally to the servicer, but having a third-party escalation path is very valuable, especially if the regulator/supervisor contractor is involved. We've talked a little bit about the CFPB escalation line in the past, but Treasury's got its lines. I know that in the past many people have used them, and I think we can be frank in saying that there isn't a lot of confidence out there. I think a number of people are just not confident that it's been effective for them. I think Treasury has been arguing to us that they've made a lot of improvements, and it really seems like if that's the case and it really works, we need to know it, and we need to make sure our staffs are using it. If it's not working, then we can evaluate it from there. One of the things is that as we do have contact with these escalation lines, it'll be valuable and important to figure out if it's working and if there's success stories, and let our networks know that, and if there are problems, what are the problems, so that we can escalate that to Treasury as well. And we've done some of that in the past, and you all have provided a lot of input into these conversations. We've just done a round of meetings with Treasury around a number of these issues, and it's coming directly from the input that you've given on these calls, on the list, in meetings, and emails that you've been sending out. We need to continue doing that. We need to keep this information fresh. But this is an opportunity to see if we can do this in the escalation world as well. So, Chris, tell us what's happening out there.
All righty. I'm unmuted now. Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate the nice introduction there, and the chance to speak to the larger group about what our role is in the escalation centers, and what, based on feedback we get from you, as well as from our reps, supervisors, and managers there as well. And as we kind of strive to make this the escalation process much better for the homeowner and or third party that's working with that homeowner. So just to take a step back, I'll let you all know that Treasury now has a significant focus on all of our support centers, we call them, and that includes the HOPE hotline, MHA Help, which is the escalation center for unassisted borrowers, as well as the HAMP Solution Center. Part of my job is to oversee all of those entities as it relates to the operational metrics of that, everything from budgeting to average staffing, forecasting for calls, and things like that, as well as making sure that as things are going through these centers, that both homeowners and people working with these homeowners are getting the service levels that they should be getting. About a year and a half ago, we convened what we called internally our call center working group, and we did a very robust, detailed analysis on what was working and what wasn't working at the call centers. Particularly as it relates to escalations, what we found that we could do better was we identified opportunities to improve the escalation process and procedures by utilizing better agent resources and empowering and training the agents on the phones to be advocates for the homeowner. We realized that early on, and through some of the process, things kind of got to be paper pushers, as what people told us. The agents were becoming paper pushers between the servicers and the homeowners and just reporting back and forth, and that was not kind of where we wanted to see the evolution of the call centers going. So we really wanted to focus our support center agents as advocates for the homeowner, just as the housing counseling industry is advocates for homeowners. So what we've done is to really kind of reestablish how we rate and manage the call centers. We implemented some new systems that I think are working really well. I'll talk about a little bit of those, and then talk about the role of counselors and feedback and such, and wrap it up after that. So what did we do? What did we create? What did we do with the systems? We did two really important things. We created a CRM system, which is a customer resource management system, across all of the centers. So there's now a centralized database of all of our case information, and all of the reps in all of the agents in the centers can access this database and system and see what's going on with a particular case at any certain time. So we realize people get sick, they go out on vacation. That shouldn't be a rule for somebody not to know or pick up any case at any time whenever somebody calls. So we've really gotten really good systems in place, and then we can now report off of that system, and that gives us what we call our call center metrics that we look at, and I'll go into a little bit of details about what those things are. The other thing we implemented was a real-time resource management tool for the supervisors and the management at the support centers. So what they can do now is they can access the status of all rep cases in real time. They can see what cases are open. They can see what ones are in process. They can see what milestone dates are coming up. They can see what milestone dates have been missed. And that allows the management teams there, as well as the supervisors, to be more efficient in the way that they're managing these cases and can pick up and spread the work around should it need be done. We've identified based on our staffing levels on any certain day, any certain week, we know what the average case per specialist is. So we know if one case specialist happens to have a bunch of very complicated or cases that seem to be taking a longer time, we can shift some work around so that we're working to resolve with both the homeowner and the servicer in a much quicker turnaround time. So we're really pleased with that. We've also developed a robust scorecard, and that's here at Treasury. So what we do is we rate the call center. We rate the call centers every month based on their performance, and what the scorecard is focused on are a couple things. Well, there are two large buckets of that, and one is kind of the operational metrics that folks who have experience working with call centers know: staffing, call flow and forecasting, average speed to answer, call time, that kind of thing. So we have all of those specified and laid out, and we look at those. Excuse me. And then we have a scoring system for agent performance, which I think is really important, and that's based on several key factors. We look at the entire case notes are pulled for the agents every month, and those cases that are closed and resolved. So we'll pull the case notes for those agents every month, and they're sent to Treasury for review. And we look at several aspects of that. We look at the accuracy and completeness of the agent's work to make sure that they're communicating correctly with either the homeowner or the third party. We look at their adherence and knowledge of MHA policy and guidelines, and make sure that when there is a discrepancy between what the servicer says and what's being escalated in the case, that agent is pushing back on the servicer to get a change in the original determination. And then they're rated on their homeowner advocacy. How well did they advocate for that homeowner? We look at either specific email trails back and forth, conversations via the phone, all of that kind of stuff to make sure that those agents are actually working as advocates for the homeowner. We conduct a monthly support center steering meeting here at Treasury. So we look at review all metrics for all of the call centers at one time. It's a large group here at Treasury. It includes myself. It includes people from our policy. It includes people from finance. And sometimes our acting chief actually sits in on those because he's very interested in what's going on in the call center. We look at the HOPE hotline, HSC, and MHA, and make sure that they're performing against the service levels that we have set for those escalation centers to adhere to. So what do you do when you have a difficult case and you get into the escalation center and it's working and the servicer is saying one thing and the counselors are saying another and the numbers just don't add up? I think everybody knows what the escalation process is, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. But I do want to talk about kind of what our role is, Treasuries, in that. And again, I said we have people here that are really focused on this and have been for at least the last 18 months. So servicers, the counselors and not the counselors, the customer service reps in the call center, the escalation specialists as we call them, they meet daily with their supervisors and report back on what's going on with their cases. Those supervisors in turn have key contacts at each of the servicing shops. So if there is something that's going on, the supervisors and management teams at the escalation centers will meet with servicers on specific loan level information, what the difficulty is, what's going on with the case, what's going on with the servicer, and why things can't be resolved. So we feel we've seen that improvement happening across the board now that we've instituted those weekly meetings. So much so now that we have a biweekly meeting where Treasury sits in on those calls, and so the escalation center can come to us and say, Servicer A here's a specific conflict we have with Servicer A. We're really not getting through. Here's our opinion on what's going on. Here's what the servicer is saying back to us. We can't get to a resolution that both of us can agree to. Treasury, can you please step in and intervene and talk to this servicer to get this case to resolution? And we will do that. Several times a month that comes up where Treasury intervenes and gets on the phone with the servicers and brings that case to resolution. Overall, I do want to reiterate that we do look at all of these metrics going forward. We use those metrics to improve performance, not just operational, but kind of training and all things otherwise. And at the end of every month, every resolution that receives a closed status resolution, every homeowner and every counselor who has gone through that process receives a survey. I encourage you all that go through the escalation process to fill out those surveys. We have a very, very small take rate, especially on the counselor side. I think in June of this year, we only, out of nearly 200 cases, we only had 14 surveys responded to. But what we do with those surveys, it's very quick and easy. It rates the agent performance and the service levels that the counselors received from the escalation center. It's quick and easy. You can use the survey to indicate your experience, both good and bad. We do want to hear it. And then the scores are compiled and provided to those of us here at Treasury, and we review them, and they're used for individual agent training and feedback and to improve their performance. So it's very important that those get done. And otherwise, we encourage you to reach out to us. Like I said, people here are dedicated to improving the support center experience. You can reach out to Bruce, who can in turn reach out to us. And if any of you out there have counselors or colleagues that aren't familiar with the escalation process, we understand that. We also, through the HMP admin site, we have a very nice PowerPoint that goes through all of the steps, which you can either download and read on your own, and several times a month we offer it as a live webinar. So I would encourage you to get that out there. As we make improvements to the center, we incorporate it into these webinars. I think they're good for refreshing as well as learning new things. And with that, Bruce, I think that's
okay.
Where I'll end it and take any.
Yeah, great. So you'll take questions. That's good. And
I will.
What we're going to do, so a couple things here. So we're going to do a quick poll, and it's really going to be a pretty simple question about have you or your counselors used the Treasury escalation lines in the past month? And frankly, we're asking this because we have a sense that it's not being used widely. So let's find out what the experience actually is out there.
Yep. Would love to.
And then we're interested in if you've got some issues or concerns or good experiences or bad experiences, put them in the question box, and we've got somebody who's already going to call in and talk to us about one case that is pending right now for her. Okay. So let's get the poll going. The poll's open. We've had about half the people vote so far. We'll leave it open for another
30 or 45 seconds. All right, so we're showing the poll results now. So
Yeah.
just about 20% said yes, 80% so, 4-1, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, go
Can
ahead.
I ask a question based on that? And I think I just want to get kind of feedback on that answer. So the question was, have you used the escalations line in the past month? And the majority of people said no. I'm interested to know if that is because you believe that servicers are better running kind of the HAMP evaluations and getting people into the appropriate workout solutions, or you just have not had cases that needed an escalation, excuse me.
And so people can use the chat function to kind of
okay.
share that. You can also raise your hand, and if you're connected to the phone, it's a lot easier to be able to call and have you. But it's also just as easy to type in using the chat function, and I'll share the comments as they come in.
Because I can add kind of just some anecdotal evidence of kind of what we're seeing. We see overall, even at all of our centers, call volume is down from everywhere from the HOPE hotline through the escalation centers, and I think that that's just a function of kind of where we are in the program and kind of the recovery that's happening and things like that. But what I will say about our escalation center, even though volume is down, the cases seem to be getting more complicated, meaning people have maybe been in some sort of workout solution, whether that be a HAMP modification or an MHA solution or a proprietary solution, and have fallen back out, or they're just having very specific problems, continuing kind of existing problems that are causing cases to be just a little bit more difficult.
So I'm going to. So we're getting some feedback. So I'll just share that with you before we move on. So at least one person has said that they didn't know the Treasury had this line.
Okay.
Another, I didn't know that we could. I have several cases that I need help with. So that's kind of the same idea that people are happy to be learning about it now. We do have a couple people who have said that they had bad experiences in the past, and so I think it seems like they've been reluctant to revisit. Yeah, we've had, I guess, 3 of those comments. So that's the feedback we've got so far.
Okay. So for folks that are on the line, and I can give this for you and send it out later, through, I can give the number for the HAMP Solution Center, and that's the one. That's the escalation center that handles all escalations that are done via third party, housing counseling agencies, legal services, that kind of thing. The number, there's a toll-free number. It's 1-866-939-4469, and the hours of operation are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
And we'll send out an email after the call and include all that information in there as well.
Great.
Good. Okay.
And for those folks that feel like that that had some trouble with the support centers, or may have used it in the past and didn't have the best service level experience, I would encourage you to, if you have a case that you think is escalated, I do encourage you to put it through the escalation center.
So, and what we're counting on is that there's been a change here, and that the escalation centers really do act as advocates.
That's correct.
For the homeowner, and that's, to us, I mean, that's been one of the frustrations. So I think that's what we want to try to monitor. So let's say we have a counselor situation. There's a sale date already scheduled. You're under a tremendous timeline. You call in on the line. What do they do to really get rapid response intervention? Can the call line actually stop the foreclosure with the servicer?
Yes. So if you receive what we call an imminent foreclosure, you're in a situation where there's an imminent foreclosure, and you call the center. With imminent foreclosures, and that is anything that is received within 2 weeks of a sale date. So anything within 14 days of a sale date is prioritized differently and goes through what we call our imminent foreclosure process, where an agent, this will be prioritized and given to either agent who can work the case right away or a supervisor who will take the case and take it to the servicer. So if you do have a case where there's an imminent foreclosure, that will follow at a highly kind of a highly fast-tracked kind of escalation process.
And are you able to stop the foreclosure?
In most cases, we are. In most cases, we are.
Okay, that'll be critical. So
that's critical. So a little bit about how the supervisor and management teams are organized at the Solution Center is they are organized around servicer. So just as the customer service reps are really kind of dedicated to being advocates for the homeowner in such a way at the supervisory and management level, those folks have developed ongoing relationships with the specific servicers and can reach out directly to their contacts in those servicing shops and get some action done pretty quickly.
okay, we've got Kenesha Woods, who's from Florida, from Reach in Florida, who's got a crisis she's just surfaced and talked to us this morning about. So, Kenesha, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Good, we can hear you clearly. So
Great.
What's the situation?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. So we had a client who was being serviced by Chase, and in the midst of the trial modification was completed, and she received the final modification and sent it back to Chase within a week or two of it being transferred to a new company called BSI. Never dealt with them before, but BSI, I guess, is also affiliated with a company called NewView. And the client has been relentlessly trying to make her first permanent modification payment since the end of July, and BSI will not accept the payment because they say they didn't get any documentation from Chase. The only thing they received is deed and note, and the modification document has not been transferred over, so the client can make payment, and the BSI will not honor the final modification. We went as far as faxing over as requested the signed copy of the permanent modification so they could see for the record if they will not accept it. Now they're requesting the client to go ahead and purchase their own property insurance and property tax before they could even look at our case. This was a HAMP modification.
This is a HAMP, correct. And so
Yes.
this is an example, is a clear example of a case that can and should be escalated to the HAMP Solution Center. And I can
did
tell
it
you,
because of my past experience.
right, understand. And I can let you know that, yes, servicing transfers we have seen as they become increasingly higher in volume. We are tracking those at the Solution Center. We have seen an uptick in issues related to servicing transfers, and what I can tell you is two things on our side. In the reporting system that the servicers use under HAMP has been, in the last release, was updated so that that communication between the transferor and the transferee are now communicating to each other much more quickly. So that should help alleviate some of this in the future. And as well as that we have folks in the Solution Center that are dealing specifically with servicing transfers, and if you have not worked with BSI, a Chase loan that was the servicing was sold and transferred to BSI, they've probably seen it at the Solution Center, or they can get in touch with somebody at Chase or BSI that can kind of put the pieces together and help you out on that. So that is something, and if they can't get to the same resolution, then that would be something that the Escalation Center would escalate to Treasury in those calls that I talked about that we have with them twice a month.
Okay, so the best thing for me is to escalate to Treasury. Do I have someone in this case could be assigned to assist us since it's been 15 days and the client, what we're afraid of is that now that the client has not made a payment or cannot make a payment and their first permanent modification payment was due August 1st, then they're going to throw into delinquency.
Into a delinquency status, correct. So yes, that is absolutely something that you should escalate to the HAMP Solution Center, and they will put somebody that has the responsibility of working with Chase on the case for you.
Okay.
So,
thank
and actually, Kenesha, don't go away yet. So
no.
one of actually, I would say two things. One is, the first thing is that whenever you go to use a third-party escalation line, you also want to continue pushing the service.
That's correct.
So you never want to drop, keeping
Correct.
the heat
That's
on the
a very
service
good point,
service.
Bruce. Thank you.
But the second thing is, an interesting thing happened was that the servicer, I guess, you sent the modification agreement to the servicer. Tell us what happened there.
So yeah, we submitted it to them because the client was in the office. The BSI does not seem to exist because when you call them, all you have is voicemail. So we got through to NewView, who is overseeing that loan, and for the whole hour and a half, we couldn't get through anything. But we submitted the file to them. They got it, and they still won't honor it. It's as if because they're saying that Chay's signature was not on the copy we sent to them. But what they need to realize that when we submit it back to the bank,
You just have the homeowner signature on it.
right, we have to wait for Chase or whichever the servicer is to finalize it on their end. And we all know it takes months before a homeowner could get a signed copy of that modification agreement, if any at all. So the
Right.
bank, this new servicer will not even accept what they requested it from us, and now
Right.
they won't even accept what we sent to them.
Right, right. So in terms of an escalation for that, what will happen is when that case gets escalated through the HSC, the servicer is then required to provide all of the documentation they have on that case to the Solution Center so that they can review it. So that is exactly something where the Solution Center could perhaps be able to get a copy of a signed modification agreement by both parties much quicker than you may be able to.
Well, I'd like to underline one point, which is we'll talk a little bit later on the call about the meetings we've been doing about trying to improve HAMP. But one of them was that we were trying to get Treasury to support the idea that when a modification, trial, or permanent mod gets sent out, that the servicer sign it first and then get the signature of the homeowner. That way, then you don't have this problem, and you don't have the problem of, it gets sent back and nobody actually signs it at the servicer side, and suddenly the homeowner's left out in the cold. So we're hoping you bring that message back to Treasury on that particular issue.
Yeah. Thanks, Bruce.
It looks like we have some more questions. Do we have time to take a few questions?
Oh, we should. I mean, it's important enough that we just should get this out, yeah.
All right, so first we're going to go to Charlene Kilgore, who has her hand up, and I'm going to see if we can get her on the line. Are you there, Charlene? Charlene? Oh, she has her question here on the screen. So is there an online submission process, or can we only use the phone number is her question?
There is an online. I can give you, what I'll do is the email there, it's support@hmpadmin.com.
All right, great, and we'll include that when we circulate the email afterwards. Some other questions have come in. Can you all assist if the investor does not do modification? Can you get them to consider a modification?
So with investor denial or investor restrictions, those do come to Treasury. So if that is the case, they do come to Treasury and they do get reviewed. I know they're very complicated, but yes, we can help out on investor restrictions in as much as reviewing what it says in the master servicing agreement and encouraging that master servicer to help or accept the mod.
Great. Another question, is the Treasury escalation an option after the lender's escalation team failed to respond?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Oh, and just someone else asked if you could direct people to the area of the website where they can find the PDF instructions for
Oh, sure. I'll put this in. It's hmpadmin.com, and there's a tab on there. I do believe it says resources, and it might say trusted advisors. I think I can look it up on here.
Okay,
and
we can again include that in the email that will circulate to everyone.
Sure.
Afterward. Great. I think
let me ask a question then.
Sure.
So, Chris, when a counselor submits a case, the servicer then responds and says, oh, we did everything perfectly, or oh, yes, that's right, there should be a mistake, we'll fix it. But if they're responding saying, you know, we never got the proper documents for the homeowner, which we hear a lot of despite multiple submissions, what happens then? Do you go back to the counselor, and what's the process at that point?
So just so I understand correctly, so you're speaking when a case has been escalated and the servicer says we didn't get enough documentation. Can you just repeat the question so I'm sure I'm understanding it correctly?
So whatever the case is, the escalation line goes and talks to the servicer, and they get back with the servicer's viewpoint on this. And then the question is, do you then go back to the counselor and if the counselor has a completely contradictory story to the servicer and has the documentation to show it, what happens then? When do you go back and to the counselor, check the story, and then what happens after that?
Right. So what happens after that point? That would be considered, you know, that there was conflicting stories or conflicting evidence on either side. So the next step in that process should be for that escalations the support center rep would attempt a three-way call with the servicer and the counselor, and have all three parties on the line. And if it doesn't get resolved at that point, what happens is it goes once the customer service rep engages with the servicer and the servicer responds with all the appropriate documentation, and there is evidence of a discrepancy, then that counselor either pushes it back to the servicer or escalates it up another level in the support center, so that can get resolved. So if and when there's a discrepancy between what the servicer says and what a housing counselor says, and that escalation specialist is in the middle of that, a three-way call happens, and then it is either pushed back to the counselor or the servicer for the appropriate information.
Right, and so this is the kind of role that also we'd be happy to play, we being the National Resource Center. So if you've got a case out there, definitely want to hear if the Treasury line is working, and then, I mean, if it is working, we'll communicate that more to our network. If it's not working, I'd be very interested in the specifics on the case, and then what we would do is we would elevate that to senior people in Treasury, and you know, pursue it, because it is those specifics that allow you to sort of say this is what's happening in reality.
Exactly. And so yeah, if you're seeing something different on the ground than we are, we would absolutely love to see it and address it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Chris. We look forward to seeing this work. Great talking to you, and we're going to move on to other parts of our agenda.
Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and drop off, but I appreciate, again, Bruce, thank you for having me and letting me kind of talk about what we've done, which I think is a lot of good work. I've been doing spending a lot of time focused on this over the past year, so we were really committed to making this work and continue the improvements.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Good talking to you. Thanks.
You too. Bye-bye.
Good. Well, let's see how that plays out. I'd be very interested in what your experiences are. And once we have some experience under our belts, we can start evaluating if there's things we can do to push. The other thing is the CFPB line, which I've heard some good things about, but you know, it doesn't sound like there's as much use of it as there might be, and we should really try to explore that as well. So let's move on to the agenda. We're going to do this a little quicker than I had planned. We've been talking about this question of how to integrate housing counseling into the mortgage process, into the servicing process, and a little bit of thought, though not a lot of work has been done on the rental process as well. But can we end up in a couple of years in a world where people think about going to see a counselor before they sign a sales agreement, before they sign a mortgage, before they talk to their servicer about getting a loan modification, so that we're kind of giving people information at the right time and we're built into the system. And some of this is a question of recognition of our industry, but some of this is just this idea that if you build housing counseling into the steps of the way and reward or incentivize people for going to counseling, that this will happen more naturally. They'll have to do less marketing. They will always probably have to do some marketing, and will be able to be kind of a more effective part of the mortgage system and the rental system out there. So one of the challenges, so we've talked a little bit about MISMO, the Mortgage Industry Standards Maintenance Organization, which is really just a way of defining data fields and getting housing counseling to be defined in there. And then there's this interest that FHFA has, FHA has, the GSEs have, about creating a database tied to each mortgage so that you have a whole range of information like underwriting and things like that, but you would also have where they counseled, what kind of counseling was done, who did the counseling, which agency, and maybe the counselor themselves, and integrating that information so that you can track performance. You can track if somebody becomes delinquent, can they come back to the counseling agency? And I'd like it further down the line that when you have a loan that's counseled, researchers can figure out, are these loans performing better or not? Which continually the research has been very positive on this, but it's not been industry-wide, it's not been in-depth. This would create a massive data pool that would be helpful to everybody. And a third element to this, which is the idea that at some point a counseled loan becomes a more viewed as a credit enhancement, which is the term of when you do regular underwriting on a loan and there's some special quality to it, that it's got a special insurance coverage, or it's got more money backing it or something like that. If credit counseling was viewed that way as well, then maybe the cost of money for funding those loans becomes less. There's a way of maybe funding housing counseling through these means, and that when an investor's buying a package of loans, they can see that 12% of those loans were counseled by a qualified agency, and that then says that that package is valued a little bit more because it's more likely to perform better. So pretty cool stuff in terms of getting us going in the business going forward. So one of the challenges is, well, how do you get this information plugged in the first place? And so we have, a number of you have participated in the conversations with FHFA, and we've continued talking with Meg Burns, who used to be at HUD. She had the equivalent job of Ruth Romans before she got promoted to working with the secretary. But for the last 10 years or 8 years, whatever it is, she's been at FHFA, so she understands a lot about counseling. So we've really kind of scored here, and they're very interested in this idea of integrating housing counseling into the systems that FHA is working on. And so we are trying to figure out common databases, getting the housing counseling information integrated into the total picture. And one of the problems we had to solve was, well, where do the numbers actually get integrated into the system? So the idea that we came up with was there ought to be some way to certify that the counseling actually occurred. And while FHFA was kind of poking around and talking to HUD about this, HUD said, well, we're going to start certifying that counseling actually occurred. And they have two documents which we put out on the list earlier in the week. One which certifies that counseling occurred on a home ownership project, so that could be pre-purchase, that could be refinance. I'm not sure if home equity fits in under that or not. And the other one was a home retention one. So we're going to also encourage they do a third one, which is on rental. But this does, but for the purposes of this integrating into the mortgage process, the first two are the critical ones. And we're going to have to figure out what the data fields are that they're collecting. I think we're going to tweak or recommend tweaking what's in there now. But we're hoping that that document, when it's done, will not just be sort of an exclusively HUD usable document for FHA loans and HUD purposes, but might become more universally accepted. And so if you all have comments about this and thoughts about how to structure that, it's good to get it to us now. Those forms, as they are now, went to OMB. A number of you pointed out there's some typos in it, and there was a cut and paste, and the retention document has language that applies really to pre-purchase and refinance rather than to retention. And that's all fine. What I was, I'm sure that'll all get cleaned up, but we're at a place where we can tweak this, and we'll do that. So these aren't live documents yet. They aren't ones that HUD has endorsed. These are all in the draft stage, but we're circulating them to get comment. We will continue working in this field, and our you have participated in meetings where this is one of the items that's come up. It could be really exciting for our future if we get this right and make our business a little bit easier. Also, the Coalition for HUD Housing Counseling Intermediaries convened a meeting in early July with a number, especially of the lenders. There were also some government agencies represented as well, but lenders who were supportive of housing counseling. Wells Fargo was really kind of stepped up at that meeting to endorse housing counseling and its value for particularly pre-purchase counseling. And the conversation was, again, how to mainstream and integrate housing counseling into the bigger mortgage process. And we'll continue. We'll certainly be working with the coalition on this as well, and we'll, as they develop more ideas and product, we'll circulate that to the group. But it's the good thing about it is that conversation is really including the housing, the lenders as well, and there'll be a critical piece. We'll continue working with the administration. And there'll need to be some work done on bringing in the trade groups like the home builders and the real estate industry and things like that to help round out this picture. But I kind of wanted to bring everybody up to date that there's a lot going on in this field. It's in flux. It's going to move forward. We're going to have to figure out some of our industry questions. One big question that looms large for me is, if you're going to have a certification that counseling occurred, what exactly does that mean? Do we do that when somebody's out on when they've come and they've talked to the counselor the first time? Is that enough to say that you issue a certificate? Is it when they have completed a certain amount of time, which I don't think would be, I would argue against that. Is it that you've qualified by meeting certain thresholds, like having certain front-end and back-end ratios, your credit is a certain level and you're ready to borrow? Or does it mean that you've passed a test? There's talk about having a very simple homeowner's test to test knowledge. I mean, all those kind of things we're going to need to start thinking about, and what will kind of hammer out positions on it. But those will be critical issues in the future. So we'll talk about this more. I'm going to quickly run through a couple other quick things because I know we're running out of time. So one of the things we're doing is trying to get the regulators to more aggressively solve problems with the servicers. And we've got a meeting with the Federal Reserve with the examiners. So these are people who go in and look at the loan modification deals that servicers do or don't do, and are examining them. The Fed, the OCC supervises most of the lenders that have servicing shops. So the Fed's role in that, because of the institutions they regulate, is much smaller. But there are two institutions that are that they're going to be examining, and we'll have a direct opportunity to tell them what you should be looking for, what the problems are, and what we think solutions would be that would be preferable. One of them is HSBC, and the other one is SunTrust. And we are going to, so it would be very helpful if you've got experience on either one of them. And actually at this point, maybe the best would be to send us an email about that. Send it to me, Bruce Dorpalen, bdorpalen@hsgcenter.org. since you get a lot of emails from me, it's never hard to find my email address. Doing it in writing would be the most helpful for me at the moment. I'm actually going to be out for a week. But would love to hear about HSBC. We're actually not hearing as much about SunTrust, and it would be really helpful to see what problems there are out there. So we could definitely use your input on these. We'll need it next week. The meeting will be early the following week. So the next thing on our list here, I'm going to speed this up. So I hope you know what Americans for Financial Reform is. They're a very broad coalition that we're a part of, and they were they formed to support financial reform through Dodd-Frank, and did a lot to help build political support for Dodd-Frank, but also help influence what it was and some of the stronger things to fight predatory lending and to assure access to affordable housing, affordable mortgages. It's a terrific group, very broad-based, and I've been active with their foreclosure task force for obvious reasons, and they've helped sponsor a number of the meetings we talk about. We've had these conversations with Treasury around revamping HAMP, and we had a big push. Thank you everybody for participating in getting the 2-year extension. Now they've got 2 more years. The goal was to get some reforms there to strengthen HAMP and its performance. Given we've run out of time, I'm not going to go through the list, but we've circulated the initial letter. One thing that they told us in our last meeting was that they are going to issue a guidance, we'll see how specific it is, but on the 4506T, which is an issue that many of you have raised, that if you have a joint return and you only have one person sign the 4506T, that's perfectly acceptable to Treasury, to the IRS, and you'll get the information that you need. But unfortunately, some servicers were requiring to have a second signature on it, and that got sent back. We've very clearly communicated to all the agencies this whole question about that when you get a notice that says that there's that it was missing documentation, that's not specific enough, and we need much greater clarity on what is needed. And the lost docs memo that you all worked on, that went to Treasury, to CFPB, to OCC, to FDIC. Maybe we're leaving out some. I think we sent it to the White House, so that that got some traction, and we're hoping that'll be useful. So we're circulating that, but it looks like we may have moved a little bit further on the 4506T issue. There's plenty more on that list, and we do think Treasury is listening here, and so we'll try to push more, and we'll let you know as that progresses. So just quickly on the end here, so we had an interesting back and forth a week ago on the listserv, where we had incredibly vibrant conversation about the requiring personal information on the third-party authorization, and then the next day there was a flurry of people saying too many emails, we're getting off the want to get off the list, and this is the kind of robust world we live in, and I'm happy to have the feedback here. What we quickly figured out is that it turns out there's a lot of you that like that conversation. So there was very nice, very supportive emails I got from many people about this. So we're not discouraged. This was not a problem. So please don't feel bad about all this. We have created this new headlines group, which is completely shutting down any conversation whatsoever on the listserv. It's nothing but outgoing emails. You can't reply to it. You can't post on it unless you're coming from NHRC. So it's meant to be more alerts and information. So that'll be just only the outgoing emails. And then the main list is we'll continue to allow for robust discussion. And, I love this thing because it's really helping us shape policy and program and keep up to date, and it's totally useful. So I'm very glad that people have the patience to be on it. Just to give you some perspective, there's over 540 people on the full list. There's now a little over 40 people on the headlines list. Looks like we lost about 20 people or so in the process, but we've sent them an email inviting them back to use the headlines list, and I know already some people have come back. So this was not a horrible washout. This was just kind of a reconfiguring. So those will be available to people. I do want to say, just as a piece of posting etiquette. So this is stuff you already know, but no need to ever post anything about administration here. So if you want to leave the list, send Matthew an email, send me an email. You can get off the list through Google. I mean, there's just a ton of options there, but does annoy other people. And then it's, and I think generally, you all have been very good on the list. There's some emails where some lists where people insist on saying, "Oh, I agree with that," kind of stuff. And that we've had very, very little of that. People when they post, it's all been high content, high value stuff that have been adding to the conversation, and that's what we want to keep it at. So please don't be discouraged about posting or be reluctant. At the point when you have something substance to say, we want to get it on the list. We want people to engage with it. It is not a problem to have contradictory viewpoints, right? We're a broad, diverse industry with different sets of interests and experience and viewpoints. So, politely arguing the opposite of what the previous person posted is perfectly fine. And please don't take offense when people get back and forth. I think people have, all been very good about these questions, but just, trying to make sure that everybody's comfortable with what we're doing here. This has been working, I think, really well, and will continue. There's a lot that's going to start happening this fall in all these initiatives, and we'll keep you in the loop on them. So just a last note here is that we'd love for you to join the National Housing Resource Center if you haven't already. And since we're now a year old, and I hope you guys have seen the list of accomplishments we've got, it would be we'd love to encourage groups to join. We've made one change here, which is for smaller organizations. We've heard that if this could be the fee could be a challenging, and so we've for groups that have a budget of $250,000, housing counseling budget of $250,000 or below, the membership contribution is $250 there, and you'll still get the full benefits. And one of them that we're finally getting more traction on are the credit reports. I was so surprised. This is some groups are saving a lot of money every month on the credit reports because of this $9.75. Most of you are at $12 or $14 per credit report to get the same. These are soft pulls. These are not hard pulls. It's all three bureaus and credit scores. You can do it through HCO. You can do it directly through the to the bureau. It doesn't work through CounselorMax, but we now have groups that have decided that they just won't pull their credit report through CounselorMax because they save so much money on the pull. So any way you want to do it, we're glad to work with you. Matthew's been working on creating an index for funding resources for housing counseling agencies. So we've kind of got a map of where you go for major lenders around the country. We're working on trying to develop something for government funding that'll be open to members. I'm happy to spend time with members on the phone talking about organizational development issues, strategic planning, funding challenges, and have done that with a number of your groups out there. And I feel like I learned something from it, and I think they've seen it of value. So we'll do more of those kinds of things. We really want to support the industry and help people thrive. So, Matthew, do you have any closing thoughts here?
I don't. Just thank you, everyone, for being on, and we'll pick it back up the first Thursday of September. And I'll circulate an email in the next hour or so, kind of summing up and passing on important information from the call.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend. Good rest of your summer. All right. No more calls in August. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.